This is Joe Kopsik, the Libertarians, coming to you on this Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. I know some of you probably don't know me, so here's a little bit about myself. I was raised Democrat, supported the Green Party as a teenager, got into Ron Paul and the Libertarian Party in 2007 when I was in the middle of college, voted for Ron Paul and Gary Johnson from 2008 until last year. I'm also a former three-time independent write-in candidate for U.S. House from Wisconsin, Oregon, and Illinois, and I manage a political theory blog at www.aquarianagrarian.blogspot.com. If you go to the last entry from May 2017, you'll find a link you can follow to thebookpatch.com where you can buy my two self-published collections of essays from that blog, Libertarian Conspiracy Theories and Soft Communism for 90s Kids. I'm currently doing some marketing strategy development with the Chicago chapter of the Libertarian Party, which is right next door to my home chapter in Lake County, where I'll likely become an SOC rep, that's State Organizing Committee representative, this month. By the way, go to your local county or multi-county chapter meetings, become an SOC rep at this month's meeting. It'll help the party set up the groundwork for becoming an official party after surpassing 5% of the national popular vote. I wanted to state that as sort of my cred within libertarian circles. I wanted to note that I'm actively involved in the Libertarian Party, but at the same time, I've always been open to the progressive and Marxist worldviews, ideas coming from the Green Party, anarcho-communists, libertarian socialists, Noam Chomsky. Some may characterize me as sort of to the left within my own party, but if you ask me about globalism, the state of Israel, the Civil War, Barack Obama's background, anyone who knows me will attest to the fact I'm probably about to say something that'll make you want to run out and go join Antifa. It's like the Murray Rothbard meme says, if you've been called a fascist, a communist, and an anarchist in the same conversation, you're probably a libertarian. All of us have some views we share with the left and with the right, because what we all have in common is that we all think that we're right and that other libertarians and their economic ideals are stupid, and that each one of us needs to be absolutely free from any kind of communist, fascist collapse or the risk thereof that other self-described libertarians or non might accidentally cause by thinking they can remake human nature in the image of some spook political system. That's why I'm making this video as my first contribution to Libertarians to explain this. Why are there socialists in my party? The Libertarian Party does not sue for intellectual property violations, so that means that basically any group of people can start an in-person meetup group or a Facebook group or page or a Twitter account or whatever, claim they're a new caucus of the Libertarian Party, call themselves whatever they want, and the party won't do anything about it. That's why the Libertarian Party now has, based on the information I found, which I published on my blog earlier this month, a whopping 37 caucuses. So for part of this video, I'm going to respond to some of the disagreements, most of this video, disagreements and misunderstandings that have been going on for the last few months between the right libertarians of the anti-socialist caucus of the Libertarian Party, the Facebook group Libertarian Party USA Unofficial, and the adherents of Hans Hermann Hoppe who favor a minarchist closed borders LP as a preferred political vehicle, versus the left-leaning libertarians at the newly formed Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the LP, formerly the Black Flag Caucus, and us left libertarians here at Libertarians. So if you're watching this and you're asking why there's socialists in your party, I'm here to answer your questions. Recent comments from critics of the Lib-Soc Caucus have accused our wing of the party of anarchist and communist entryism, siding with looters, believing that rent and property are theft, and supporting the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Some of their objections just revolve around, oh no, socialists, am I going to get cucked? While others repeat the baseless claim that libertarianism and socialism are incompatible polar opposites and that libertarian socialism is an oxymoron. Some critics say socialism, but that's statism. Other critics say socialism, but that's anarchy. Okay guys, you got me. Socialism is anarchist statism. Chaotic, orderless tyranny, like we knew about in the good old days. I think we can all agree that we have any clue what the words we're using even mean anymore. So let me address all those criticisms. First, do the libertarian socialists of the Libertarian Party want communism, anarchy, or statism? The answer is that we're just as open to statism as the rest of the Libertarian Party is. A temporary government with minarchist intentions, partisan politics, and decentralization, this is what the LP wants, and it's what libertarian socialists want too, so why not work together? You know socialism and statism are not the same thing, right? You see, socialism is not just the presence of a welfare state. Socialism is not anything the government does, and the more stuff it does, the socialister it is, as a popular meme says. We have a state-supported capitalist economy, not a mixed economy. If we had a mixed economy, 1 in every 2 businesses would be a worker cooperative instead of 1 in every 1,000. Socialists don't want a welfare state. They want fair distribution of resources so that a welfare state isn't necessary. There's nothing unlibertarian or unconservative about that. That's downright Reaganite. It's like Ron Paul said in 2009, whether we think socialism and welfare states are viable or not, a voluntary society would leave socialists free to fail if that's what happens. If we fail, we don't expect you to bail us out. That would be irresponsible. It would be a violation of the NAP and the free market. We'd be externalizing the risks onto you instead of assuming the risks ourselves. That's unfair. We don't. You might ask, but won't socialism lead to communism? Depends what kind of communism you're talking about. Big C communism was the Soviet Union's Council Socialist Republic in the 20th century, while small c communism applies to all types of communism that have ever been tried, including the anarcho-communism of Joseph de Jacques and the Paris communes. There's even a form of libertarian communism, like look up Murray Bookchin. Free communism. Some say the goal of socialism is communism. It is, as long as the socialists follow through on abolishing the state. If your objection to this is socialism never gets rid of the state and becomes anarcho-communism, the state never becomes anarchy. Well, if you think that and you think that socialism and statism are the same thing, then guess what? You're a socialist because you're involved in a political party. There's no reason the Libertarian Party can't be a vehicle to grabbing hold of the state, drastically limiting its powers, decentralizing it, and then whatever else it does, it still seems necessary. Depoliticize it, whatever it is. Get independent quasi-governmental organizations and voluntary associations to do it. Reform the judiciary in the process so we have broadened civil liberties in a real legal process that makes sense, that the state doesn't interfere in without reason, that actually respects rational, long-standing principles of contract law. Yeah. Minarchy with the goal of anarchy is what I want. The goal of socialism, which is the economic system wherein workers and or society control the means of production, the goal of socialism is communism, the ideal political expression of socialism. Communism wants a stateless, classless, moneyless society. You might be thinking communism always fails. Well, I like to point out that the Western powers typically bomb any country that even tries socialism or communism or even think about it, even democracy sometimes, interfere with their elections, usually without congressional or popular approval, without respect of civil liberties. If you're really a libertarian, you shouldn't have any problem with people thousands of miles away trying a different economic system as long as they're not bothering you. Here's another criticism of our wing of the party. You guys believe property is theft? I thought you believed property rights were sacrosanct. And the guy goes to his right libertarian message board and he goes like, the federal government owns too much goddamn property and I don't want to pay for it. Oh, so you're agreeing that not every property rights claim that's ever been made is valid? Who would have suspected that? Turns out that's why we have a government in the first place. After protecting people, you resolve their property rights disputes, protect people's just property claims, set up recorders of deeds offices to sell people parcels of land and keep track of ownership, establish some basic zoning laws to streamline development. And now you're probably thinking, yeah, but that invites eminent domain, that encroaches on my property rights. We agree with you. If they're going to take our land, they have to pay us. Actually, the Fifth Amendment originally meant the government has to get our permission, but they've eroded at that. Now they can seize our private property for public use without our permission, and they say that private businesses that serve the public are public entities because they provide public accommodations. It's a nonsense argument and it's a mess. But you're not right about it either, right, libertarians? And I'll get to that. But let me ask you this. If all government property takings encroach on the people's ability to buy land, then doesn't the government owe us some form of compensation for using this land? Indeed, rent. Google Henry George. Indeed, that's what Founding Father Thomas Paine recommended, that each citizen be compensated with a yearly stipend as compensation for the takings of the right to own and inherit property and the right to fully own property. You might argue, yes, government's responsible, but government doesn't produce wealth. The government's not equipped to solve the problems it's created, even if it really wanted to solve them. It can't just give us a bunch of land or give us a bunch of money. Well, then once again, why are you still trying partisan politics? Pierre-Joseph Proudhon was a French mutualist anarchist. 180 here. All right. And the first person to describe himself as an anarchist. All right, we're on France now. Anyway, he said property is theft, a slogan echoed by the Libertarian Socialist Caucus, in addition to rent is theft. Anti-communist and anti-socialist libertarians often repeat the claim that this and the abolition of private property under communism mean that communists want to steal my toothbrush. Of course, that's not the case. Proudhon made what is private property versus what is a personal possession distinct in his writing. A toothbrush or newspaper, ordinary goods, especially those that are mass-produced and or easily movable, are personal possessions. Private property refers to things like exclusive landed property titles, factories, large machines, especially things that are difficult or impossible to move, rare, unique things that it makes more sense to own collectively. We agree with you that people should be free to do as they wish on their own property, with their own property, unless and until they harm someone or infringe on others' rights. We're not saying the property shouldn't exist. We're just saying we're pointing out examples of people using their property in ways that infringe on other people's rights that you should have a problem with, but for some reason you don't. So sorry for subjecting you to your own ideals. We don't want to steal your toothbrush. We just want you and the government to pay the community rent if you own property in that community. You have to compensate them. You didn't create that land. We think your workers, we acknowledge your workers are not actually free if they are not free to be part owner in the very machines they depend on for their livelihood and their survival. The property functions best when it's owned by the people who use it, not the person who rents it out for profit. Not all poor, unemployed people are poor and out of work only because they're lazy. If there's any truth to that argument, then the Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party is for you. Property is theft doesn't mean that owning a toothbrush is theft, that if you have a toothbrush you must have stolen it from someone, or that someone can legally steal it from you, or any of that nonsense. It means that private property is only maintained with the help of the state. If not, in all cases, then at least typically. If your business has a charter or limited liability company status, or receives subsidies or taxpayer funds of any kind, small business loans, the easy credit that the Fed provides, or you rely on police or military or even state licensed private security to guard your property, guess what? You're a capitalist who relies on support from the state. Capitalism is not free markets. Intellectual property protections, trade promotions, favorable professional licensing, and other professional regulations. If you receive any of these services, then you receive stolen taxpayer money, because taxation, as we agree, is legalized theft, right? This is the government picking winners and losers in the economy, even bailing them out and restructuring them with our money. This would not happen in a free market, in a voluntary society, in the absence of compulsory taxation. All businesses would have to survive on their own merit based on what their workers and customers are willing to do for them, without having their money stolen, given to entrenched business interests to keep them in the black and keep them in the monopoly game, without being pressured to pay higher prices than the sellers really deserve. If you own a business, you might be saying, I only receive a few of those government services. I get overcharged for them, and I don't even want some of them. We get it. We want you to be free to give up those services while we're also giving up the responsibility to pay for it. Just don't call the police complaining that someone's on your property. You are on your own to defend your property, because it's your private property, right? Well, it is, only as long as you're able to defend it. Feel free to hire any family, friends, acquaintances, mercenary groups to protect that property. But if you force anyone to pay for your services or give them services against their will, even if you aren't charging for them, if they don't want it, don't give it to them. Take political action to stop other non-state actors, security forces from going into competition against you. You've committed aggression and violated the NAP. You can't do that. It's a free market. You also can't collude with others, especially utilize threats of state violence, in order to coerce people into a state of duress, poverty, and ignorance of their full options, in order to make them desperate enough to work for you at levels of compensation to cheat the worker out of the rights to the full product of labor. Right libertarians call that the fruits of one's labor. Again, we're just bickering about words. But, they say that when they complain about taxes being taken out of their paychecks. But we here at the Lib Soc Caucus say, why are you complaining about taxes when a much greater value is taken from you through the exploitation of your labor? You have no idea how much you'd be worth in a free market, because we haven't tried a free market. It's also not okay to bribe people into defending you. You should be able to convince them that you're worth protecting, such that the compensation they receive for a job well done is just the icing on the cake compared to the pleasure of providing a service that is both needed and worthwhile. If they don't think you're worth protecting, they're going to stand down when there's a threat. Look at what happened to Rome. You might be asking, so then what? Is the labor market involuntary? Should it be illegal to sell your labor to an employer instead of keeping all that you produce? And what would Ron Paul say at the thought of socialist libertarians? Well, he would probably say, read Lysander Spooner, because he, like Frederick Douglass, recognized that the states of involuntary political association, indentured servitude, and labor for extremely low wages that followed slavery cannot be described rightfully as voluntary, because people's choices were so limited after slavery was abolished that they had few recourses and alternatives available to them other than sell their labor for low wages. This is why lib socialists use the term wage slavery. because being deprived of most of your political choices and most of what you produce make you as unfree and as poor as a slave. That's our condition. We're lower than serfs. We can't fully own property except in 2 states in this nation, and at that barely. If you can't own property, then you are property. If you're born on somebody else's property and you're told you have to work to earn money that some dead man invented in order to get off that plantation, then you are property. You know, work. If someone tells you work makes you free, that was a sign that was outside Auschwitz. Arbeit macht free. No. If government doesn't respect your bodily autonomy and it thinks you can vote away the rights that you have in your bodily property, then your body is government property. Why is it illegal to kill yourself? Because it's illegal to destroy government property. If you can't dig for natural resources on your land, it's not really your land. If an FBI agent can search your home without a warrant or permission, it's not your home. If a cop can search the trunk of your car without your permission, it's not your car. If a cop can search your ass for drugs for 13 hours because you flicked a cigarette out your car window, then you don't own your body. It's not yours unless you completely control it, even if someone's got a warrant. But why don't we own our own bodies? Why are we born poor on someone else's property and forced to work our ways off? Like a rat in a maze or a labyrinth. In Utopia, Thomas More explains that 400 years ago in Britain, serfs' common lands were enclosed upon by royals who allowed their sheep to run roughshod over the serfs' farmland. The royals' goal was to raise as many sheep as possible in order to provide wool for the royals' garments. As a result, too many sheep were raised in Britain and too little food. So, with their land having been stolen from by the monarchist state, and with no place to live and little to eat, the serfs had no way to survive other than to agglomerate and concentrate in city centers, namely London, and sell their labor to capitalists in exchange for the means of survival. You could say that they were forced to the city centers. We at the Lib-Soc Caucus will certainly say that they, our ancestors, for all intents and purposes, at least ideologically, were forced. You see, force and consent aren't black and white things, unlike some, NAP beating, I don't even know what to call them. No, it's not black and white. There's gray area. The use of physical force in defense is a great example. Coercion, duress, pressure, when does it start being voluntary and stop being non-consensual? You can't take away every option except my way or the highway, and call that still a choice between 2 viable, equal, acceptable alternatives. And that's why you're a libertarian, because some state has said to you, gun to your head, Clinton or Trump, Obama or Romney, and you said either pull the trigger, I want more choices, or I have a gun too. You gotta realize taking away choices for no good reason is coercion, it is force. It's pressure, it's duress, it's all that. A person can't sign a contract when they're inebriated, lack the proper judgment, lack sound mind and body, or under duress for any reason. So then why should we pretend they can sign the social contract with the government, which doesn't exist, or more importantly for the purpose of the discussion, a labor contract voluntarily? How is that voluntary? All the pressure the poor are under because of the state's actions and the economic system it chooses to perpetuate its property rights systems. Government does so much to make it difficult for poor people to get their shit together well enough to even consider getting a job. Charity can help, nonprofits can help, but by and large, businesses that get government handouts, I'm calling them capitalists, don't do shit to make it any easier. If you're trying to go from living on the street to applying for a job, you have to spend your own resources to satisfy your needs for food, water, housing, shelter, and medicine, aside from what people voluntarily give you, or the social welfare you might be on, all while trying to keep your identification documents together and pay for it, usually. Pay for a phone so you can call employers, pay for mail and postage and printing costs so you can send resumes, pay for the bus so you can get to Kinko's to send those resumes and print them, pay to keep your clothes clean so you can be presentable enough to go to libraries, go in for interviews. Those libraries will kick you out if you shave in there too long. You gotta have friends that help you. You need so much. If the person who hires this man had any decency, they'd say, hey, we're gonna help you write off all those expenses on your taxes, because those were expenses you underwent in order to get a job. But no, capitalists I've never heard anyone doing that. They see no good in doing that. All they want is privilege after special interest demand after bailout. They want all the government services they can get on the cheap. They want non-consenting customers to pay for it through their taxes. Gary Chartier co-edited a book called Markets Not Capitalism and wrote an article called Bleeding Heart Libertarians for Redistribution. Kevin Carson wrote one called Who Owns the Benefit? The Free Market is Full Communism. What do these left-leaning libertarians have in common? They want to promote freedom and help the poor by getting the government out of the way to stop protecting property, including intellectual property, so that people can own more property and more things more affordably with more competition to provide lower prices and let the market work its magic. Jeremy Rifkin, who is to my knowledge not a libertarian, the author of the Zero Marginal Cost Society, came to the same conclusion as these guys. So if you don't like poor people being able to afford things and you think it's the government's job to protect big businesses, domestic industry that's hoarding resources, that are spoiling on the shelves at prices we can barely afford, that exist in such abundance that they have to pay us to store them if they wanted to get rid of all of them, then you're a capitalist, you're a mercantilist, you're a dirigist. You believe in government-directed economics, picking winners and losers. You're part of the problem, and you should get out of our party. If you don't want that, then what I'm saying doesn't apply to you. It's no problem. I'm not going to pay the cops to shoot people for stealing. Their duty should be to protect people before property and profit. But the Supreme Court ruled in the 1980s that police don't have any obligation to protect and serve the general public outside of a private contract. Yeah, they're a private mob. Yet they can harass the general public and extort all the money out of them all they want and provide whatever shitty level of service they feel like, or none at all. And that brings me to my next criticism. Libertarian socialists side with people who are looting in the wake of natural disasters. You know what they tell you in private security guard training videos, by the way, private security guard? Protecting people is more important than protecting property. Why is our military in so many countries? Because we mostly protect property and our domestic producers' rights to sell in those countries and in their markets, if they have markets, and instead of protecting people. Why are NCAPs ruining our movement? Another question. Because they continue to barely assert that it is totally normal and an inseparable part of human evolution to shoot anyone who comes onto your property. They come up with distortions of property rights ideas, principles that pretend to allow them to trap people in their homes by purchasing all the land around their property and not creating an easement. Shooting whoever happens to come onto your property, even if, or especially if they're unarmed, there's an emergency, there was a misunderstanding, ridiculous orders about property protection were given. It's ignorant, predatory, reckless, belligerent, uncivilized behavior. It excuses violence, aggression, and irresponsibility, which is the single biggest obstacle to a voluntary, self-responsible society. This is not anarchism, it's not voluntary, it's troll nonsense, and it does not represent the libertarian movement, especially not the Libertarian Socialist Caucus. We're sick of seeing people get shot to death simply because they stole a few things. Of course, many of them are really killed because they shoot police officers, but they're defending themselves. Shooting police officers is legally justified, according to state and federal Supreme Court precedents that I could cite if you want me to, when the arrest is illegal and the officers intend to use deadly force. A few petty items of mass-produced merchandise are not worth a human life. Even a human being who sadly has been driven to theft, odds are by the states of impoverishment and artificial scarcity which the state created and which its chosen economic system, capitalism, now maintains. We don't want a government-supported capitalism. We don't want government-supported socialism. We want a voluntary society, voluntary governance for those who want it, voluntary taxation for those who insist on it, a meritocratic free market where workers and consumers have economic power, buying power, selling power, and the right to operate as a cooperative or a nonprofit alongside for-profit enterprises. No cronyism, no theft, no coercion, no unnecessary or involuntary taxes on productive activities, no one-size-fits-all mandatory economic system that everyone has to use. Just laissez-faire voluntary exchange, where the forces of competition and cooperation work together to drive command and control state actors and price-setting monopolists and oligopolists out of the market, subjecting the free market to its own natural rules, those explained in the first several fundamental theorems of welfare economics. Among them, no interference with the free flow of labor and capital. This is why a free market libertarian party must be an open borders one and not a closed borders one. Setting up international and even state borders interferes with the free flow of people, goods, jobs from one location to another. But most importantly, it normalizes the treatment of the activities that government agencies provide public services, treating them as if these industries were immune from market forces. We don't hate markets, we just don't think we'll need to keep them around forever. They're here to serve a purpose. After that, we probably won't need them. I'll get to that though. And that brings me to the criticism that libertarian socialists believe rent is theft. So you get that taxation is legalized theft. Hopefully by now you're also starting to understand the property is theft too, at least the property owned by government and every firm it supports. But rent is theft. You're asking, why is rent theft? Rent is theft because, as I explained, if you're born on someone else's property, you gotta earn some dead man's money to get off of it. You're on a plantation. You gotta obey whatever laws a property owner enforces that might limit your rights to own property, that he can put you in poverty through his rules. You can force you to eat things that aren't nutritious for you and say you should be thankful. You're not free. A person can't help but take up space on this planet, so why should he have to pay for it? As Bill Hicks said, we all pay for life with death, so everything in between should be free. Moreover, 97% of the world's land is unused. Much of it is unclaimed, and most of the rest of it is claimed by government and its cronies. Claims which are invalid because they rest on their continued ability to steal our money and reap profit through the exploitation and devaluation of our labor. There are 6 vacant residences for every homeless person in America, all being hoarded by landlords and developers who price their units based on what rich people can afford, not what people in need can afford. Much less, nothing, which is what they're worth because there's too many of them. Excuse me, deviating from my notes here. This is supply-side economics. Oh, I'm getting flustered. A demand-side economics would cater to people's needs and help the market address poverty by recognizing that abundant goods that exist in greater quantities than the amount needed, are not subject to economic calculation through market-based pricing mechanisms. Swallow your own medicine, guys. We don't want to redistribute land or housing. We just want to get governments to stop passing local building codes, stop giving subsidies for housing in flood-prone areas, get rid of laws that make homesteading a longer and more difficult process than it already is, make it easier for ordinary people to claim the 4.8 acres each of them is owed by virtue of being a peaceful person born without his permission onto a planet that doesn't understand or respect his rights. Get the government out of the way so markets can help poor people afford things. There's no reason why free markets shouldn't result in free goods and free people. You might say, yeah, but there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, abbreviated Tonstoffel. These are the same people who are saying, volunteer to work for our party, yet nothing is free. Okay. Air, water, land, space, and natural resources are not created resources. All those things encompass the full economic definition of land. Privatizing them takes considerable effort. You can't just do landmine homesteading, the ridiculous hypothetical practice wherein an ANCAP lines the perimeter of his landed property with landmines in order to instantly murder anyone who comes onto his property so he doesn't have to shoot them. He's spared the effort of that. Whether they come on intentionally or accidentally, whether they come on unarmed or armed, they don't care about disproportionate force. They don't have any ethics. They're idiots. It's not enough to justify a landed property rights claim simply by capturing, conquering, or otherwise enclosing the land. Like you're trapping a human being, you psycho. If it were, then government would simply award your land to whoever murders you. If it were, then Native Americans would barely have any land left. But you see, there's the problem. We say rent is theft, and you say, I don't see the theft. Look at the history of how conquerors treated the people. I'm not saying us, conquerors treated the people who are native to this continent. I'm not saying we're responsible for that. I'm not saying we're totally irresponsible either. Taking advantage of their apparent lack of concept of property rights, massacring them, fighting wars against them, confining them to reservations, separating them from their children, forcibly educating them to propagandize racist, imperialist Western values. You think we owe them nothing? We should pay them rent for being here. As the popular socialist cartoons suggest, if your boss inherited your factory from his father, and he inherited it from his father, and his father fought to help conquer the land the factory was built on, then there should be no problem if you and I, the worker and boss, decide to fight for the rights to the factory. Some people say you can't make that comparison. Well, there have been dudes who claim to represent their entire government. They're called kings. It's like I am the state. People. Not sure where I was going with that. Yeah, you can compare one person to a government because they can both exercise conquest. That's the whole idea of monarchy rests on. So you can't just conquer some territory, set up some traps on it, and call it your property. You have to actively use it, adequately defend it, and sustainably improve it. If not, at least keep it from falling into disrepair or unusability. If you can defend your property, you can do whatever you want on it that doesn't harm others and keep everything you produce. But you're not free to destroy your land, because you did not create the land. Nature did. If you destroy your own property and render it unusable for others who might want it, after, you're going to die, I mean, if you're an idiot, if you're smart, maybe you'll survive. If you destroy your own property, render it unusable for those others who might want it, render it damaged in a way that causes your neighbors to lose property value and lose their reason to stick around, then you are destroying your own community. You are no worse than the looters and Antifa people who you say are doing the same. So don't use social welfare queens as an excuse to be a corporate welfare whore, sticking up for money, interest, profits, and property instead of real human beings like you with real problems, unique experiences and perspectives, and the ability to make informed, rational decisions, which property cannot do because property is not dead and not human. Rent is theft. And a landlord passes on the costs of government services to his tenants. If a landlord truly cared about his tenants' safety, he would not charge them rent. But he needs to because the government puts pressure on him to do so. The state makes us shitty people, and that's why it can't make us moral people. And eventually we need to grow up, tell it to stop, and realize that we're erecting a class system which destroys any chance for equal justice under the law, and which is based on people's ability to extract money from the economy, whether they work unnecessarily hard for it or simply earn money through the manipulation of value of currencies and engaging in speculation. Rich people don't need more houses, poor people do. Stop protecting the rich by ending cronyism, allowing competing currencies, whether that's local, consumer-driven, cooperative, electronic, resource-backed, precious metals, numismatic innovations of which we can't even yet conceive, whatever. Let them do that, and the people can control their own money in a way that allows them to counterbalance and undermine the supposed value of the assets held by the super wealthy patrons of government largesse. Right and left, all libertarians can agree that a more progressive income taxation is not going to solve the problem of income inequality, certainly not on its own, probably not at all, ever. We agree with you. We don't want forced or legislated equality. It's impossible because people will make different and unequal decisions about what to do after that. What we need is economic opportunity, economic liberty. We're with you on that all the way. Opportunity. You see, it's got that word port in there, P-O-R-T. That means door. We're aiming for a society in which people can walk through any door they wish. So keep the doors open to your country, to your businesses. Have a real free market. Eliminate every barrier to entry into the market, every fine and regulation and licensing fee that limits our ability to go into competition. And that includes physical barriers like borders, down to the very doors and locks that protect the buildings that house government's cronyist patrons from the grave injustice of having to shelter one of your own brothers, created by God in his own image just like you, from the harsh elements, granting him one single measly night's relief from the desperation which you have inflicted upon him through your passivity. Make it easier for poor people to go behind the counter at a soup kitchen and serve others. Make it easier for homeless people to walk into coffee shops run by people they're friends with and who trust them to serve themselves, friends, patrons a few drinks. That's economic opportunity, and it doesn't require legislative equality. All it requires is the government getting out of the way so that private property owners are free to share their property with those who are in need without having to pay royalties or legal settlements from licensing agreement violations, to share their property, because once you buy it, it's yours. Just to some government-protected company that has a legal monopoly on something we need to survive. They have gotten enough privilege that we've paid for. They don't need to steal from us more. Another criticism of us: the Libertarian Socialist Caucus supports the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Oh my God, how are you ever going to have libertarian unity when someone in the party supports the Civil Rights Act of 1964? I don't know. Maybe by nominating one of those people for the presidency in 2016? Now, I admit, Harry Johnson was the only one of the 5 leading libertarian presidential nominees who said in the debate that he'd vote for that law. Honestly, he didn't even give a single reason, but he should have. Before I go on, I'd like to say that almost all the libertarian arguments against that bill are valid. You don't need government to stop segregation because it's a moral problem, not a political one. A discriminatory enterprise will go out of business because nobody will support it. Government is the reason Jim Crow laws existed in the first place. Totally agree with you on all counts. However, as I explained before, no business in America is truly private, truly operates on a free market, voluntary basis. Each one of them receives some form, at least one, of taxpayer-funded public services. They all receive police protection, don't they? There's more. You can go to my blog, goddammit. Are you telling me to support a voluntary society, I'm obligated against my will to pay taxes that go to support businesses that actively discriminate against people? If they want to discriminate and not steal my money, that's fine. I don't care. They can discriminate against me. I don't give a shit. But don't go about pretending that protecting private property is the only way or best way to support a voluntary free market. Most of the property you're talking about, the government should be defending, that's government-protected property of entrenched business interests that receive money that the government stole from you. Are you against cronyism or not? It's not that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was right. It's just that not every single argument against it is totally sound. Some left-wing libertarians say free the markets and advocate for freed markets. We point out that we don't have a free market. We never have. We have capitalism for over 99% of the economy. State-created, state-sponsored, state-funded capitalist enterprises engaging in business practices that wouldn't be economically feasible without the promises of the state to steal our money to sustain them and keep them afloat. Create a consumer financial protection board to tell us that toxic financial products are A-OK, and keep markets open for them in foreign countries who want to be self-sufficient and want to have nothing to do with us and our shitty products. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination and segregation in enterprises that serve the public. Of course, businessmen don't do business with the public. They do business with individual members of the public, persons, who voluntarily agree to enter into contracts with them and come onto their private property. So the CRA of 1964, it blurred the line between what's public and what's private because it didn't address it at all in the Supreme Court case or the original law that the case ruled was invalid. It's a big reason. It's a big reason why so much confusion exists about who built that, the private versus public problem. The short answer to who built that is if you're a leader, you're the boss and you're a leader and you actually do work, you did help build that. If you're a boss who's not a leader, who doesn't do any real work, your employees built that. And either way, government stuck in its nose in every part of the process, helping when you didn't need it to, interfering when you did need it to help. You may have built your business, but your workers did too, and a bunch of taxpayers helped pay for it against their will. Yeah, it's a total mess. As I explained, the state takes away all our choices, limits our access to alternatives to the state, because they're a jealous boyfriend like that, mocks us for having nothing. It's like, they break your leg and say, give you a crutch and say, if not for us, you wouldn't have a crutch. Hey, that party's trying to take your crutch away. And then it blames us for neglecting others when we follow their orders to step over our friends and family, competing against them for jobs and resources so that they can get their tax money and pay back their banker buddies and their investors, their lenders, their campaign contributors, their cronies. The state cannot solve our problems because, like segregation, our problems are moral, ethical, and societal. Politicizing these problems only complicates them, raises the stakes to all or nothing, and makes the problems that much harder to solve. We need to get the state out of the way so we can see whether socialism and capitalism can survive without it. And until we do that, we can do nothing more than propose largely untestable, hypothetical, idealized political and economic systems, and argue about terms like socialist, capitalist, public, and private until they lose all meaning and we're blue in the face. So allow, even practice discrimination if you like. Just stop the flow from my pocket to businesses that I don't want to support. And black-owned businesses should be able to discriminate all they want. I don't care. You have in a heavy racialized gang area. You gotta be realistic about who you're protecting yourself against. It's fucking voluntary exchange. But you can't just publicly fund oppression and expect me to pay for it. Many of our jobs wouldn't exist if it weren't legal to keep people away from the resources they need in order to survive. And in a service economy, that's a large part of what our jobs are about. So like I said, opportunity, keep your door open, do your job, serve people who are in need, who come to you looking for help. See if there's anything free you can give away. Hopefully your boss doesn't stop you. Hopefully it isn't illegal for you to do that. Or else get your businesses to stop being active in more than one state. And then the federal government will have absolutely no say in the matter because you won't be involved in interstate commerce. There's always a way around even the worst laws. We can all agree on that. Amidst all this recent kerfuffle about a Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party, there's been a consistent effort to ridicule what the Lib Soc Caucus believes, dismiss and undermine left-leaning libertarian concerns, and limit the discussion about these topics and sweep them under the rug. One admin of the Facebook group Libertarian Party USA Unofficial, which recently voted something like 99-1 in opposition to socialist caucusing within the party, posted that we should keep our comments confined to a single thread on the page. This is, of course, laughable, as there are many left libertarian-friendly groups and pages all over the social network. More worryingly, another critic of the Lib Soc Caucus, this time someone from Lessons in Liberty, posted an image bearing the message, "There can be no tolerance toward libertarian socialists in the Libertarian Party. They will have to be politely removed, so to speak." This quote echoes the sentiment of Hans Hermann Hoppe, who said, "There can be no tolerance toward Democrats and communists in the libertarian social order. They will have to be physically separated and expelled from society." I can't say for sure whether the person from Lessons for Liberty posted this quote in jest as a way to lampoon the harshly anti-democratic sentiment of the Hoppians and apply the idea to the new Socialist Caucus farcically, or whether the message is to be taken at face value. I don't know that. If the message was honest, then yes, we in the LP should be cautious that some who call themselves Democrats and communists might want to subject our civil liberties and our rights to our bodies as our physical property to democratic votes, utilitarianism, using people like a tool. On the other hand, some Democrats, communists, and socialists do respect civil liberties and natural rights, like democratic Republicans who founded this nation and believe the society should be ruled by law, but that people can also distribute resources democratically as long as all those resources are given to the collective voluntarily. It's those leftists whose support we should be welcoming. A society that has to physically remove people in order to establish social and political order is not a viable society, nor a responsible one. Definitely not an anarchist one, nor one that adequately respects civil liberties, among them the right to choose who protects and governs us from among several and many competing alternatives. There's no particular reason why a nation must be a political one, nor why a nation must be a nation state, nor why a nation must have borders, whether physical or purely on a map. If you read Hannah Arendt and Otto Bauer, the Austrian Marxist, you will understand that within socialist and Marxist thought there is a current that deeply respects individual liberties, natural rights, social order that's independent of the state, Emma Goldman, and the rights of cultures to remain distinct and resist multiculturalism if they wish. Look up the cultural pluralism of Hannah Arendt. Any government in the world could, at any moment, voluntarize all its services, make them all optional. You don't have to pay for it if you don't want it. You can give us money even if you don't want services, if you want to volunteer, do whatever the hell you want. They can voluntarize all their services and begin to provide services to people who reside outside of their jurisdiction. Start with the people just outside the border. As long as doing so is logistically possible and affordable and feasible, you can provide services to anyone as long as you can reach them. As I explained, borders only get in the way of libertarians' quest to subject government services to market forces. Panarchy is the way to go. No territorial governance, no more being protected and served against our will, no unnatural borders that were designed by dead men and have little to no logical relationship to, nor respect for the cleanliness and integrity of the natural physical environment. Bioregionalism. So if you want to preach physical removal, go ahead, just be consistent. Democrats and communists, fine. Socialists, sure. Libertarian Socialist Caucus, the Libertarian Party, I like to see you try. You know what? Steal our money and give it to businesses that don't allow black people. Sure, go ahead. I only ask one thing. Get the fuck out of my party. Go to the Trump rally where you belong. You're a soft fascist and a state capitalist with no capacity for empathy, critical thought, understanding of history, or the ability to understand what happens when the economic system you've been promoting no longer applies because it's satisfied all our needs, fulfilled its purpose, and rendered itself obsolete. Say goodbye to markets, folks. They're going away. In conclusion, scarcity's a lie. Hard work is unnecessary. Free markets lead to free stuff. If you want to call it communism, go ahead. The state protects entrenched business interests, not people. It protects property on private contract. The state can only interfere with free markets, not support them. We've never had free markets. We've never had socialism. So if I can try socialism over here, you can try free markets over there. We can visit each other, trade with each other on equal, reciprocal, mutual bases, according to how we value other people's labor, our own labor. Let the people in your private or proprietary community subscribe to my socialist services if they want. And if people in my libertarian socialist community want to engage in commerce with dispute resolution organizations, private security firms in your for-profit private community, I have no right to do anything to stop them. They're free. I can't stop them from, relocating, subscribing without relocating. I don't care. So if you're going to welcome, so the question is, are you going to welcome all this free support from the left? Or are you going to let anarcho-capitalists, communist-hating Hoppians, and Trump-loving InfoWars listeners continue to play make-believe that they're real libertarians? How long do you think the Libertarians Party is going to last if it keeps trying to recruit from the right? Have you read the news? Have you know who Nicholas Sarwark is? Russ Feingold, Mike Gravel, Ron Wyden, the Democratic Freedom Caucus. These are libertarians in the Democratic Party, people who genuinely love the Bill of Rights. People who like Jon Stewart used to give a shit about, he supports the fucking draft now. But anyway, so what if they're disaffected former Bernie Sanders supporters in the Libertarian Socialist Caucus? Now they support you. So are you going to refuse their support, turn them away, and throw away his opportunity of a lifetime, or are you going to accept their support and grow the party evenly to both sides, the left and right, at the same time? And stop before you hit communism and fascism, of course. But, we got to understand what the hell all the words we're using. Everyone just throwing out fascist, socialists. Oh, Nazis are socialists. Socialists are Nazis. Like, oh my God. But we got to start cleaning this up. We have to understand what the hell we're talking about if we're going to fix this country. So feel free to weigh in. Anything I was wrong about, feel free to correct me, suggest readings. Thank you very much for listening. This is Joe Kopsick of Dankertarians, signing off.